Welcome back to the Metropolitan Fire Chiefs Leadership Development Podcast, where we explore elements of today's fire service. This podcast is for Metro Chiefs by Metro Chiefs, where we engage in conversations about the challenges and opportunities that matter most to the leaders in this amazing association. But while this series is created with Metro members in mind, the topics that we explore, and this topic today is relevant to current or aspiring fire chiefs and departments of any size, not just in the U.S., but also around the world. I'm your host, Alec Otten. I'm a member of the Metro Chiefs and the fire chief for Aurora Fire Rescue in Colorado. And today is another really cool episode. It's part two in a mini series that we're doing on wellness in the fire service. This is brought to you by my friend sitting here on camera with us from LifeScan Wellness. They're a leader in comprehensive early detection. We've used them ourselves here in Aurora. And this partnership really allows us to spotlight some of the most pressing issues that are facing the fire service. And to me, for those of you out there who are my fellow Metro members who know me, few issues are more critical to me personally than the issue of cancer, and specifically today, occupational cancer. It remains a leading cause of line of duty deaths in the American Fire Service. And while we've made some gains in awareness and prevention and early detection, especially with Todd's team, we've still got a really long way to go. So today we're going to take a deep look into the reasons, right, that we're talking about it, the risks and the research that are really kind of shaping this challenge and solutions, and what fire departments can do right now to protect their people. So before we meet our guests, it's my privilege to introduce the CEO of LifeScan Wellness and longtime advocate for firefighter health and safety, Chief Todd LeDuc, to share a little bit of a welcome and then perhaps a little bit about his why.
Hey, thanks, Chief. I got to say, it's a privilege to not only be joined by colleagues, but friends. You mentioned the inroads that we've made, and it's because of the folks amongst many on this call. LifeScan, one of the, we had 3 decades of experience in early detection and joined by many others across the country. We're proud of our partnerships with the Metro Chiefs and IFC and IFF, but a large part of, I think, some of the gains we've seen is by increasing awareness and advocacy. And the folks on this call have certainly been champions in that arena. So it's been our honor to promote this segment of the Metro podcast, sponsor it, and the goal is to the saying is, as the Metro Chiefs go, so goes the fire service. So the goal for us continues to be, along with, I know, Alberto and Jeff and yourself, is to increase awareness, and as best practices are identified, and as we showcase those, and networking occurs, that's how we're making real cultural change. So real excited. I had the opportunity to work closely with each of you, and I know the work that you're doing is transformational. And I know, Chief, in your department, we've had some real early detection. I'm sure you might touch on that. So it's putting all the pieces together, and I couldn't think of a better crew to invite on. And I'm honored that everyone was able to carve a little bit of time out of their schedule to tackle this such important issue. I know for the Chief and myself. We, at least for myself, I'll speak for myself, signed up for never knowing in chiefdom how many funerals and bedside visits, and it's something that, when it's preventable, we've got to do a better job as a community. And I think hopefully this podcast will provide some of those answers. So thank you, Chief. Thank you, Alberto and Jeff, for agreeing to join us. I do want to give a shout out to Chief Dennis Rubin from Kansas City, Kansas, who was planning on being here and had travel issues, family, and so we appreciate his willingness, and we'll catch him on a future episode. So, thank you, Chief.
Sounds good, Todd. Thanks a lot for that welcome and your why. I'm going to start off a little bit differently here because when you surround yourself with really smart people, they've got lots of stuff to do. And so I'm going to first have Dr. Alberto Caban Martinez. I got that right? Okay, I crushed it. Awesome. Otten gets mispronounced a lot too, so I'm with you. But I'm going to have you introduce yourself. Dr. Jeff Burgess is also going to join us, but he's going to join us in maybe 20 minutes or so, and so we'll really start off with you and just concentrate on you. I mentioned in the introduction that we're going to take a deep look into the reasons that we should be talking about this, the risks that are really starting to be recognized within our industry, and then the research that's helping us develop solutions. And so because you've got about 15 to 20 minutes with us, if you just want to start kind of launch off on that and kind of talk through those 3 to 4 categories around this really prominent challenge within the fire service today, I'd really appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely, Chief. And I just want to say thank you. It's an honor and a privilege to be with you on this podcast and be able to talk to our other Metro Chiefs, to Chief LeDuc for his unwavering support of Everything Firefighter Cancer Initiative, and to my colleague, Dr. Jeff Burgess, who's been a wonderful partner and mentor throughout this process. So I'm a professor at the University of Miami, and I serve as the deputy director for our Sylvester Firefighter Cancer Initiative. I've been doing this work now for 11 years. I'm incredibly passionate about how we can use a person's work environment to improve their health and their safety while they're there. I believe that as an employer, we have responsibilities to make sure that our staff has the resources that they need, and that, even if we can improve their life and their health a little bit better at work, we should try it. I came into this role actually from the construction industry. I do a lot of occupational studies, and actually was working with construction workers. And here in Miami, when I got recruited to the university, the Cancer Center's leadership came to me and said, listen, the local fire department, Miami-Dade Fire Rescue, and others came to us saying, could you take a look at our insurance claims data? It feels like we're paying out a lot of insurance claims in cancer. Is this normal or not? And one of the things that's really unique here at the University of Miami is that we have the state's cancer registry here at the university. And so what that means is that anybody who gets cancer in the state of Florida, whether you're up in Gainesville at UF or you're down in Key West, the registry sees those cancer certificates. So then through our strong relationship with our state fire marshal, we're able to take the certification records from the state of everyone who's a firefighter, connected to that cancer experience. And then you have a unique database where you can say, what are the specific types of cancers that firefighters are developing? So you can take that tool and then basically compare it to the general population. What cancers is the fire service seeing that are the same or different from what you're seeing in the general population? So with that data in hand, then what you can do is say, is there something in the work environment that might be increasing that risk for a particular type of cancer that you're seeing higher among our firefighters? Compared to the state population. And so that's how the Sylvester Firefighter Cancer Initiative was born. It was really through an observation that, wow, there's like these different cancers that are higher in prevalence in the firefighter service than compared to the general population. So over the years, we've been developing research programs, projects, educational aspects of cancer understanding within the fire service through our Sylvester Firefighter Cancer Initiative. There's a lot of really neat things that I think have hopefully been of service to the fire department, because usually we get asked, what do we do about addressing cancer? And from my perspective, like the way you can prevent cancer, right? Because we want to prevent cancer. Our goal is like you could retire and live your life, and cancer doesn't develop up in there. is
Right.
sort of break it down into the different buckets of how potentially cancer can be exposed, right? So in the fire service, we know that when you do fire incident response or you go to a training exercise, you're exposed to the chemicals that are present in that fire, in that fire response. It doesn't matter if it's wildland, if it's structural fire, a kitchen fire, you're exposed to certain chemicals, and some of those chemicals are carcinogenic. And so we want to be able to characterize those, toxic exposures that firefighters encounter so that we can figure out how to mitigate them, right? And develop countermeasures to reduce them. So if a firefighter enters a fire scene, what can we provide them in terms of physical resources pre or post to reduce those chemical exposures that have carcinogen on there? The other aspect of sort of cancer is, can you screen for cancer clinically, right? And we know that there are some of the cancers that are elevated in the fire service that there are recommendations for cancer screening. So an example is a colonoscopy, right? So colon cancer is elevated in the fire service, and can we initiate colon cancer screening early enough in order to reduce the experience of our firefighters to make sure that they don't develop that type of cancer? And then there's other factors that we think about, like think about sleep, right? So sleep is actually a factor that can contribute to cancer. And what do we know about the fire service? We don't sleep very much because you got 24 hours
That's right.
in your day, and most of them you're awake. And so one of the things we're learning through the fire service is, how do sleep patterns ultimately influence this cancer risk? And is there a better way of structurally organizing the fire service to reduce that risk, right? And I know it's not a popular topic to say, like, I like my 24/48, but can we scientifically explore opportunities to maybe change a little bit of the sleeping pattern? And I'll give you a perfect example. My colleagues in Des Moines, Iowa, they have this amazing fire station that has some really neat environmental interventions to reduce hazards that could interrupt sleep. Right. So have you ever been at a fire station where like all the alarms blow in all the rooms,
Oh yeah.
in the kitchen,
Yeah, it
everybody
makes
and
you
their mom?
stick to the ceiling, when the klaxon goes off and you're like the cat stuck to the ceiling because it scares the crap out of you in the middle of
That's
the night.
right. Even the neighbors are like, know that there's an alarm happening. And so, one of the things that we've become more knowledgeable about is there a way of using in technology to limit the noise and the sleep disturbances to specific units, right? So if you're not a unit that needs to respond to that particular call, we only arouse and wake up the unit that needs to be done so that the other unit can continue rest and sleep throughout it, right? And so these are sort of like micro interventions at the organizational level that can in some ways contribute to lowering our risk every day. And I think it's an important message to tell fire chiefs and even the firefighters that the responsibility for cancer prevention is multifactorial, right? It's not just you as the fire chief or a union president that has responsibility. Sort of the organization as a fire department and the individual workers can work together to do that. One of the ways we do that through the Sylvester Firefighter Cancer Initiative is supporting fire departments and developing a FACE team. And this was what our Palm Beach County firefighters taught me, which was like, develop a FACE team, have a concerted committee of, key decision makers in the fire department that can help and advise the fire chiefs about different strategies that might be, amenable to that fire department and their union in terms of changing aspects of what we talked about, like, opportunities for cancer screening, changing aspects of exposure in the work environment, laundering gear to reduce, contaminated exposures. I think those are like using a FACE team to help sort of inform what are different cancer strategies that department can explore is one really neat way, inexpensive way to start that conversation about, reducing cancer exposure in the fire service.
Let me ask you something, because you've got a really unique opportunity, right? I know that there's a national cancer registry and I, not any kind of indictment of federal level stuff, but it's huge. It's almost too big to be nimble enough to succeed. You've got data sets that are very specifically tied to firefighters in Florida, which is not a small state, right? You got a ton of professional firefighters and volunteers, I'm sure, in the state of Florida. You've got access to their, like, what they do, what their certifications are, where they work, that kind of stuff, as well as their cancer diagnosis, which is an incredible research tool. What has made you go, aha, like that you perhaps have identified as solidly associated with specific either work environments, certifications, departments, organizational designs, or other risks that I might be not even paying attention to or thinking of right now? What's your aha? What are the big three, and then what surprised you about that data set?
Yeah, I'll tell you one big one that when I first started my career on this topic 11 years ago, which was skin cancer, and I'll tell you why. So when we did that connection of data using the cancer registry to certification records, we saw in this state level population data, which is a really strong evidence base of data, right? Because you've got the true clinical diagnosis of the cancer. And in that moment in time, I saw really elevated rates of skin cancer in the fire service compared to the general Florida population. Remember, Florida, we have like 22 million people here, and we are a slightly, I'm going to say, mature, older population, right?
That was nice.
Of people. So you expect to see more skin cancer in the general population because it's a more mature population. But we were actually seeing a higher prevalence of skin cancer compared to the general Floridians. And so, what do you normally see when you see a firefighter come out of a fire scene? They're covered in their soot, right? All that black skin and face. And it makes sense, right? Like they're basically marinating in the toxins that they're coming out of their fire incident response, and that's causing cellular dyscrasia, changing those cells. And so it made sense that the data we were seeing from the registry was showing that our firefighters were getting a higher rate and earlier diagnosis of skin cancer compared to the general population. So it's got to be work related, right? And I was like, okay, so what can we do for that? What are things that we can do on scene and when you get back? Sorry.
No, I was agreeing with you. I mean, it's the $1 million question, right? Because they go, well, I hear your problem, right? I hear the problem in the industry. Now, what is it that we do? I'm surprised, right? Because I'm sitting back here. I'm thinking colon cancer. I'm thinking testicular cancer. I'm thinking thyroid cancer are going to be ones that are super high. You just surprised the crap out of me because I would have never thought skin cancer. Intuitively, yeah, once you say it, it makes sense. And the why behind it makes sense. But I want to know what do we do? So what do I do now? I mean, decon wipes, shower within the hour, like these kinds of things. Are you seeing differences in departments that are employing those kind of things?
We do, yeah. Over the years, I think, and I know Dr. Burgess will agree with me too. Like over the years, we have been seeing certain, but it still surprised me. Today, I had lab meeting with my team, and we're working with a fire department outside of the state of Florida that is will remain nameless, but they still are not doing any type of decontamination procedures, even gross preliminary decon on scene, right? So we have a lot of uphill battle with sort of just providing the education, and I know fire chiefs will appreciate this sort of like organizational culture of how we sort of indoctrinate, doing it. Because I could understand if we didn't provide the engine with a decontamination bucket so that they had the resources and materials to do decon. But there's many alternative approaches, even like just wiping and cleaning. And we can go down the rabbit hole of which is the best wipe, this wipe to remove this particular,
There's always an opinion.
Always an opinion, and still lots of science to do there, to figure out what, best materials we can do. Our colleague, Dr. Kenny Fenn, has a paper showing, traditional soap and water is effective at reducing a certain percentage of polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons from that area. So we could, debate forever which is the best one, but like common things are common, right? And so if you can do preliminary decon when you're on scene, you're not moving the carcinogens that you're picking up on the fire scene back into the engine and then back to your fire station, right? And then therefore reducing the skin cancer risk that we see there. And so I think, how do we think of, I always use the NIOSH total worker health approach. So if your listeners are in front of a screen, pop into your popular search engine, NIOSH total worker health approach. And it really sets up a framework of how we think about interventions in an organization. And we say like, okay, what can you do, at the organizational level, at the management level, and at the worker level? Because it really is a multi-pronged approach about cancer reduction, right? What you eat, how you sleep, health behaviors, reducing those carcinogenic exposures. I think it's multi-pronged.
So I got about 4 minutes left of your time before you got to go and do more important work than talk to me. And I want to be respectful of that. you're waving a magic wand. You're a wizard fire chief today, right? What things are you doing in your organization? And understand, I love the concept of the FACE team, like people getting out there and really selling this message. Sometimes, you can't be a prophet in your own land. You might have to bring people in who have these experiences, right, to help change your culture. I get all that. Culture change is really difficult, turning the Titanic. But if you could do that, if you could flip a switch and make these changes today, what are you doing as a fire service leader to try, based on the evidence and the research that you've been doing, to try and improve the environment to reduce the risk of cancer for your members?
Yeah. So Chief, I'm not a firefighter. I know I get told all the time, maybe in pretend la la land, but over the years, I've learned a lot from our firefighter collaborators. And I think if I had a magic wand, and this is totally selfish as a scientist, is encourage our firefighters to be engaged in research. The only way we can move the needle on our understanding about what we can do in the fire service is by participating in research. It doesn't matter whose research. And I'll give you an example. Like, for example, here in the United States, we're really lucky. You mentioned this earlier at the beginning. We have an amazing asset, the National Firefighter Registry, that's trying to, at the national level, create our understanding of what's happening with cancer in the fire service. And the NFR needs participation, right? So if you're listening to me from, Alaska, Washington State, New York, like, we need your support in the NFR to be successful in that understanding. Like, for example, in Arizona, we have our National Firefighter Cancer Cohort Study. Here in Florida, we have a bunch of different research. Like, reach out to your local research projects and support them, because scientists like myself and Dr. Burgess and others that we work with, we are trying to move the needle in cancer prevention to make sure that we stop cases from happening. And when cancer does happen, how do we help navigate those firefighters to quickly rehabilitate them, support their family, and bring them back into working in the fire service? Because we need them. They have to be in our community to help protect us for it. And so I would say and leave the message to our listeners that if you could please help us by participating in firefighter cancer research, you could really make a big difference, in moving the needle on how we strategize and protect fire service members from cancer.
Thanks for the plug there, because I think sometimes when it's not impacting you directly, right, you're not interested. And I just had a visit right before we did this podcast from an amazing member of our organization who is going through a fight with cancer. He's on his third of 6 rounds with chemo. Dude's all in, right? He's like, I know my purpose now, right? And he's very clear on that. Sometimes if you haven't been through that experience, right, it's really hard to go, well, why do you need me to register, right? Because I don't have cancer currently, right? And that's just as important. I am personally signed up for the National Cancer Registry. I've done that after I had some great advocates come around and really encourage us to do that, make it as easy as possible for a dummy like me to do it. It is super easy, and so it's not a ton of information, but it is really helpful for our researchers, not just now, but into the future, right? So thank you, Dr. Alberto Caban Martinez. I'm just going to call you Dr. A, right? I appreciate your time. I appreciate all the work that you're doing to take care of the people in our industry and find ways that we can be safer. If we can ever do anything for you, I hope you will let us know. So thank you so much for your time today. And we are now joined by Dr. Jeffrey Burgess, who is popping on here. And Dr. Burgess, there he is. If you can just tell us a little bit about yourself and then the work that you're doing in this space.
Sure. Great. Thank you, Alex. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today. It's great that Dr. Alberto Caban Martinez had just kind of had set up the stage and talked about many of the same things that I'd like to talk about. But briefly, my background, I'm a professor at the University of Arizona in our Zuckerman College of Public Health. And I am the director of the Firefighter Cancer Cohort Study, which I'll describe in a little bit, but that's what we call a prospective, which means looking forward. Cohort is the fancy word for group. So looking at firefighters over time, we're in about 32 states now. over 8,000 firefighters enrolled. And what we do is we collect both blood and urine on the firefighters so that we can look at both exposures and changes at the cellular level over time that will precede the development of cancer. So we do work. We've worked with Alberto collaboratively. We are working with the National Firefighter Registry for Cancer, as Alberto was mentioning to you already. But I think what kind of sets us apart is this idea of following the firefighters over time and collecting the blood and urine. And so we can say a lot of things from that, and I'm happy to share that today. And actually, my background too is I previously worked in emergency medicine, medical toxicology, occupational medicine. So I've been working with firefighters for over 30 years now, and there's not a better group to work with. I love working with firefighters. We're community engaged research, which means the questions come from the firefighters, and the firefighters help us to do everything. We're working with hundreds of fire departments, and without those firefighters helping us to do the project, we wouldn't be anywhere.
Tell me, I mean, you're talking about a prospective research, right? You're measuring blood and urine. How much are you learning, and are you having people that have transitioned to being cancer-free, to being diagnosed with cancer, who are part of that study? And what are kind of some of the early findings that you're seeing, or alignments with the types of work or shifts or departments or frequency of fires or investigations, things like that? What's the early compelling information that you're taking away from this?
Well, thanks, Alex. So we have, working with the fire service, discovered an awful lot of different things. And some of the work, so we've started, again, it was first working with Tucson Fire Department, and they had come to us because of the death of Tom Quesnell, their fire cause investigator. And that's what got us started looking at cancer, when we'd been working on many other issues previously. But they had kind of three main questions that they wanted us to look at, which were kind of what were the exposures, what effects did those exposures have on the body that could lead to cancer, and then what can you do about it to reduce it? So those big categories. And really our focus is not just waiting for cancer to happen. I mean, that's a missed opportunity. What we want is to focus on prevention. So we've been able, and I'll start with the exposure side. So we found, working collaborative, this is one of the first things that came about our study, was that if you look at all the firefighters on the fire ground, so not just the captains and the firefighters that will go into a fire, but if you also look at the engineers or vehicle operators, depending upon where you are, and paramedics, everyone on the fire ground was exposed. So everyone got exposed, regardless of whether you went into the structure or not. And now all of a sudden that you know that, you as a fire chief can figure out ways of reducing the exposure. So one of the things that Tucson did, which really isn't widespread, but we have good evidence for it, is they put their engineers on air. So they let the engineers wear their SCBA, while they were, operating their vehicle, and that it wasn't required, it's voluntary to participate in this, but those that did were able to reduce the amount of chemicals that got into their body from the fire by 40%. So that's a substantial reduction. That's just one thing right away. We also found that if you do that on-scene washdown, you can reduce your exposures by over 30%. But fast forward to today, we're doing some studies with over 2,000 firefighters looking at those PFAS or forever chemical levels. And we found that on-scene washdown will reduce the most toxic form of PFAS, PFOA, by close to 20%. So if you do that regularly, you can actually have lower exposures. And then, we have a bunch of things that go on from there, but I'll just start with that.
Yeah, that's a ton. Right. And so what I'm hearing you say is, with these 8,000 participants that you've got participating in this study, this isn't like a passive process. You're staying in contact with these research participants with enough regularity that if I run a big fire up on Colfax, that we're getting in contact, we're getting blood and urine samples, even post-incident in many cases, where I can list out the number of fires I've been to, what I did on those fires, how I protected myself, whether I was on air or an engineer without air, or I did the decon or not. And you're able to link all these things together in real time to measure some of the risky elements that are showing up in blood and urine.
Well, yes, exactly. And each project that we have, and we have to thank FEMA for a lot of the funding, also NIH. Funding has come from individual states like Arizona and North Carolina, also from individual fire departments, also the IFF. So, many organizations have contributed to be able to do this research, but each project is a little different. And one of an example of what you just brought up was we had done PFAS levels on firefighters in multiple different states, including firefighters in the LA area. And so when the urban conflagrations came in January, we actually were able to compare firefighters before and after that fire. And we were able to see changes that occurred at a cellular level, like within their bodies, that may put them at long-term risk for diseases. So this is something we've identified. It's going to help us figure out ways to help prevent those changes, and then we can look for changes over time. So similarly, we responded to the folks in Maui, to East Palestine for the train derailment, and actually did a smaller scale response, also working with Fairfax County recently, where we're in the midst of trying to provide them some information back, where we had, again, people before and after the fires. So we don't always have that. Sometimes we have to come in afterwards, but we can say an awful lot about both exposures and effects of those exposures from measuring blood and urine.
It seems like an incredible workload, right? And so you thanked the states and then FEMA and other agencies for contributing money. That's a huge workload. Like, I can't imagine what this infrastructure looks like that you have to build out to make sure that you're able to do those things. How does that work?
Well, we're really a partnership. So you can think of the Firefighter Cancer Cohort study as like a framework in which you can do a whole bunch of different studies. So, I'll give an example. Dr. Heather Stapleton, who you may have heard of before, she's an expert analytical chemist. She does a lot of the wristband work, looking at exposures with wristbands. Incredibly smart person. She, working with the state of North Carolina, decided that they wanted to evaluate firefighters in North Carolina for PFAS exposures. And so she was able to have them join the FFCCS. And now we have, up to maybe additional 1,000 firefighters in our study using the same framework, so that, we can add the information he's collecting from North Carolina to the things we have in many other states for PFAS, and now have a much bigger picture and have a lot more information. So by bringing in a bunch of different projects using the same framework, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts.
So are you still in the process of recruiting research participants? Are you still looking for people, or is 8,000 enough?
Well, our goal has been 10,000, and that was based on having enough firefighters that you could, at the very least, find firefighters with some of the more common cancers that they would develop over time. It's also over a 30-year time period, because there's something called a latency period. You probably heard of it, between the exposure and the onset of cancer. So that can be various years, from short as 3 years for some forms of leukemia to over 30 years for some form of lung cancer, particularly associated with asbestos exposure. So, we want to continue, to add at least another couple thousand firefighters to the study. And then after that, I think it really depends upon the funding that's available. In the end, that's really what kind of drives us as academics, and our ability to do research is the ability to get the funding coming in. But this is something we're incredibly devoted to. We have a great group of partner universities, also working with NIOSH across the country. So, together, we've been able to really begin to answer a lot of important questions from the fire service.
So if I'm a Firefighter Online, or let's say, and I think you came in time to hear me talking to Dr. A about a member of ours who's going through this fight right now, and his kind of passion to change behaviors in our organization. That kind of passion, right, can drive people towards this. If we're recruiting people to sign up to be research participants, what's involved in that from an individual who's interested in contributing to this really amazing body of research?
Well, our particular study is department centric. Rather than just having, firefighters come in, we want to work within departments, because one of the important things is actually knowing how many fires that they've been to over a period of time. So actually, if you go way back to about 2015 or so, when Dr. Doug Daniels published that one of those first studies, maybe it was 2014, on cancer in the fire service, and that was from Chicago, Philadelphia, and San Francisco. They actually not just looked at the cancer rates, which is what everyone really focuses on, but that 2015 paper, they actually looked at the relationship between number of fires you fought and cancer. So we've actually found that looking at the number of fires, that can be correlated with changes at a cellular level and things that turn on and off genes that are associated with cancer later on. And why is that important? It's because your prevention is going to depend upon what causes the cancer. So as Alberto mentioned, a lot of exposures on the fire ground, those are known carcinogens. Obviously, the idea there is exposure reduction. But what if it's PFAS? What if that's driving it? Or what if it's problems with sleep, right, et cetera? You want to be able to match the treatment to the outcome. But to answer your question, more completely, it works with the individual fire department. We offer enrollment to these fire departments, based on different studies. Some are wildland firefighters, some are structural firefighters, and so some are those that respond to wildland urban interface fires. And we get their blood, we get their urine after we've done what we call an informed consent, so that they understand what's involved with the research. And then we ask them a survey questionnaire. And then depending upon the study, some of them, we just follow them up every 2 years and get blood. And then we do an online survey every year to find out, well, did they develop cancer in the interim? Do they have some other diseases as well? So, and then for some, we collect urine or blood after a fire and look at those. So it varies, but it's not a huge time commitment for each individual person.
That's great information. So if a department is interested in participating in this, I mean, you've got an audience here of, out of the 150 largest fire departments in North America, how might they get involved with this initiative?
Well, we are always happy to hear from the fire service. So we've had a number of fire departments reach out to us and say, hey, we're interested. And then we do our best to use our existing projects to have them participate, or in some cases we have to apply for additional funding, and then depending upon that funding, we can bring folks in. But at any point, I encourage firefighters to reach out to us, so they can reach out to me directly. We also have a website, ffccs.org, for the Firefighter Cancer Cohort Study. So they can also go in there, and we have people that should be able to respond to those inquiries within a couple days, and we get them all the time. So I'm very happy to kind of talk with different fire departments, because again, our best ideas, and really all our ideas, come from the fire service. And for the engineers on air, that came from Captain John Galata of Tucson Fire. He was the one who really wanted to focus on that and test that, and the on-scene washdown, for example. It wasn't me saying, oh, you should do this or that. We provide the information, and then the fire department can use that information in any way they choose to help protect their firefighters.
I think you heard me ask Dr. Alberto, anything coming out of the preliminary research or some of this real-time or closer following that was surprising or striking, and you're like, man, I got to get this out here, stat, because this is pretty significant information, and people can act on that?
Well, we presented some of this at some of the Metro Chiefs meetings. So for some of the listeners, they may have heard it already. But one of the things recently that we were quite impressed with, I guess I wouldn't say surprised, but impressed, was the effect of plasma donation on serum PFAS levels, so PFAS levels in your blood. So the firefighters in the state of Arizona asked us to look at ways to reduce their cancer and cardiovascular disease risks. So working together, we came up with a plan, and they were also interested in measuring PFAS levels. And so we validated, they asked us to validate to make sure that the results were similar here as they were in a previous study in Australia, where they looked at blood and plasma donation to lower PFAS levels. So again, not having higher PFAS levels are bad for you. I think that's pretty clear, and consistent for research. The Australians found that if you gave plasma and to a lesser extent blood, you could reduce your PFAS levels. And we are finding kind of the same thing when we're asked the firefighters before they entered into our study, where we assign them to different treatment groups. We're seeing the same thing. And we're also seeing other things, like I told you, that wash down for reducing the PFOA levels. But the plasma donation, people who'd given plasma prior to starting our study had significantly lower levels of essentially every PFAS chemical we had. And if you give it at a commercial location, commercial plasma donation, they not only give you some money for it, and maybe some people have done this in the past to get a little extra funding, perhaps, that they also send their plasma to locations called fractionators that then break the plasma apart into different products and get rid of the PFAS in the process. So you're not like you're giving it to anyone else. So that was one thing. Another thing that just came out recently, that we're working with the wildland firefighters, and we've already shared this with them. So we don't share anything more broadly until we share it with our participants, because they should hear it first. They're the ones who putting themselves on the line. If for wildland firefighters, they had washed their gear before responding to a fire, then depending upon the chemical we measure in the urine, which comes from both dermal and inhalation exposures, that you can actually have between 20 and 60% reduction in the chemicals in your urine just from having washed your gear beforehand. So we found similar things in the structural world years ago, but this was really, quite impressive. So we've already shared that with them. And I know it's hard to always have clean gear in the wildland setting, these big campaign fires, et cetera, but it gives fire departments the information to say, hey, this is important. This is something we should really focus on. And firefighters are great problem solvers. They can figure out how to make something happen. And the final thing I'll say is we look at mechanisms. I told you ways that exposures cause cancer, and those have been used by IARC, the International Agency for Research on Cancer, to help determine that firefighting causes cancer. Well, we found that, for example, intermittent fasting, which many firefighters are already doing, helps to reverse some of those changes that we see with firefighting, or at least helps to protect against some of those changes. So these are things that we're starting to come up with, things that firefighters can do to help protect themselves. So it's not just exposure reduction, but things like looking at your diet, maybe intermittent fasting, keeping your exercise going. And then Alberto or Dr. Caban-Martinez mentioned sleep too. We've already shown that reduced sleep is associated with adverse reproductive effects on women firefighters. And I'm sure the same thing would be true in male firefighters if we had those data as well.
You talk about firefighters being great problem solvers. I mean, I'm hearing some pretty substantial problem solving going on in your world as well. What are you most excited about moving forward here? I mean, the future of your research, the technology that's coming in to help you do your research. What do you not lay awake at night worrying about, but lay awake at night anticipating, helping us be better at the research that we're doing?
I think, we've come a long ways from not having enough information to prove that firefighting causes cancer. And, that question has been answered. We know that it does. Now I think really our challenge is what's the best way of prevention? So I think we're finding more and more evidence-based information to share with the fire service. Like I told you, this wildland stuff that just came out in the last couple of months that says, hey, this is, a good way and a practical way to reduce exposures. We still have challenges for wildland firefighters. The whole idea of, what type of respiratory protection should they have, et cetera, what is reasonable for them. So we have challenges there, but certainly I think we're making progress. And, we made even more progress in the structural world too. So we're starting to understand the effects of these exposures and what fire departments can do about it specifically. And there's some exciting things that, in the past, I considered kind of pie in the sky. Now I think maybe, we can get there in the next couple of years. We're starting to look at things like nutraceuticals that may help reduce the toxicity of the smoke that firefighters are exposed to. So we finished a study with San Francisco Fire Department. We're waiting, I think, to get the final results back to them. That was run by Dr. Jackie Goodrich out of University of Michigan, and it was supported by their union and their cancer prevention organizations there. But so that may show evidence that certain nutraceuticals could be effective. We're doing the same work with Tucson. And we're also finding evidence of oxidative stress. So like that was one of the things we saw with the LA fires. Well, there are potent antioxidant things that you could take. We don't know if they will be effective or not, but this is something that now we could try and see whether that could reduce some of these effects we're seeing for firefighters. So maybe in the future, it really will be that, popping a certain pill that could be helpful. We still have to pay attention to the basics: exposure reduction, healthy diet, healthy exercise, sleep. But some of these other things may help to reduce the excess disease burden we're seeing among the firefighters.
That is some exciting stuff, and I'm looking forward to seeing where that goes. I guess my green tea is not going to be enough, but
it's a good start.
I look forward
good start, Alex.
It's a good start. Doc, what questions am I not asking that I should be asking as a fire chief, right? When it comes to the research findings and that kind of a thing. I mean, I'm in a position where, I don't know what I don't know. And so I'm thinking, operationally, what can I do here? What's the future bringing? Like, what kind of resources can I provide my members? That's probably very fundamental. What am I not asking? What am I not paying attention to that I need to be paying attention to moving forward?
Well, I think every fire department is going to have different level of resources available. And so that one thing that, if you say, what's the basic, like what should every fire department be doing? And we know some of this stuff, but it bears repeating. That's making the annual medical surveillance evaluations available are critical. You can find cancers there, right? And also making sure that the firefighters, at the very least, get that ability to be screened for cancer at a basic level, like the things that are supported nationally, like colonoscopy, right? I mean, screening for prostate cancer, screening for breast cancer. Those are a no-brainer. And I think that having those available is really important. And then you get to the higher levels of the things like Todd does for the ultrasound screening, et cetera. Certainly we're content, that's, I think, the next generation of research is how many cancers are we finding there? How much is that helping the firefighters? What different ways could we be screening firefighters, and what would those benefits be? So we're still a little bit off on that, but I think those are some of the things that are coming. But again, back to your question, I would say make sure your firefighters are doing the basic things where we have evidence. So wearing your SCBA during overhaul. If you did that, for every firefighter, we could essentially get rid of the increase in mesothelioma, which is that cancer of the chest wall caused by asbestos exposure, because that's where the majority of exposure is coming. It's when you're not wearing your SCBA during overhaul in older buildings. You're getting the asbestos coming in. So that's one. Doing the on-scene washdown, that's the other. Finding ways to make sure the firefighters can have a second set of gear, washing the gear after the fires, again, based on the studies that we and others have done. So providing them access for these things, I think, is really where everyone needs to be at that basic level. And then you can be looking at adding additional things to it.
Awesome. Jeff, thank you. Dr. Burgess, thank you for your time. I really appreciate all the information that you've shared with us today. And as I wrap up, I want to extend a sincere thank you, right? I mean, I think cancer has touched every one of the chiefs that's going to listen to this podcast, and every one of them feels that obligation and that responsibility to care for the members of our organization. And I think we feel this sense of urgency. I think we feel like we're behind the eight ball. This was the first year that here in Aurora we'd done annual physicals in a really long time. We did it as a result of a federal grant and found several of our members with early stages of cancer. And I know that we have much more success in treating it if we catch it early. So thank you for bringing that up about early detection. And I think everybody's just here for the right reasons to try and take care of that. And so thank you for bringing your intelligence and your team and that intentionality to really figure out what's going on. I know you mentioned the ffccs.org. And so any departments that want to get involved and maybe give you some more blood and urine to test as part of this process, they can go there and connect with you. So Dr. Alberto Caban-Martinez, Dr. Jeff Burgess, we truly appreciate you being part of this process. I also want to again thank LifeScan Wellness, who's our presenting sponsor for this mini series, and supporting this conversation, for their commitment to early detection, prevention, and really the whole person kind of health approach for us in the fire service. For our listeners, the fight against occupational cancers, it's ongoing, right? But it is one that we can make an impact on, and employing smarter practices and stronger advocacy, better research, and a culture, right? Culture change that values these long, healthy, not just careers, but retirements too. I think we can change the trajectory for the fire service in the future. So that's it for today's episode of the Metropolitan Fire Chiefs Leadership Development Podcast. And thank you to all of those who survived Research Speak, right? We're not kicking in doors and putting out fires, but we sure are making an impact when we employ some of these things that the smartest people in our communities are really doing. So thank you for that and taking the time to listen. This series is, again, created by Metro Chiefs for Metro Chiefs, but these lessons apply to leaders at every level across departments of all sizes here in the U.S. and around the world. So if you enjoyed the conversation, please be sure to subscribe, leave us a review, share it with your colleagues, share this one. It matters. Let's get this thing under control. If you have ideas for topics that we should cover, please send us an email and we will get after it. That's our commitment. So keep crushing it out there. And until next time, please continue to live out the Metro vision of being a place to belong, inspiring success.